when he was working for the World Bank, he was part of a think tank called within DC called the American Lebanese League. And these were a group of young men and women who were concerned about what was going on in their country. I mean, there was what they called civil war. The PLO was taking over Beirut. I mean, the Lebanese president couldn't go into West Beirut without the permission of Yasser Arafat. So there was a lot of upheaval, and it does seem like that's just the main theme for this country, which is sad. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.
Welcome to the Beauty Seed.
And cool. Thanks for joining us again on the Beauty Seed. We have today Cathy Rouhana, my aunt, and also a talented woman in her own regard and respect without that family tie, which does elevate her status in the eyes of the world because she's related to me and the Rachel Cohn. That said, I'm really pleased to have you with us, Cathy. I want to dig into your book that you're publishing, and tell us a little bit about why you're writing it. That's where I think I'd like to start.
Thank you, Abram. Well, it has been published, but I started writing it 20, 25 years ago. I was living in the Middle East. Things were not good while I was there, and we decided that I would bring our 3 small boys back to the States. And my sister Terry and cousin Judy were collaborating on a romance, and I said, this looks like fun. Romance wasn't my thing. So I said, well, I'll try to write down some of my memories. And the first thing I wrote was, it was noon when I arrived in Beirut. And it's for no good reason, except it was the first thing I wrote. My favorite line in the book.
Yeah.
And it stayed. No matter what anybody else said to me, I said, nope, that's untouchable.
Yeah.
So I wrote about 10 pages that day and then put it away in a box. We moved. The box stayed in my bedroom in the new house. Several years later, I said, I really need to get rid of some of these boxes. Found the 10 pages. Whoa, sorry. I showed it to my sister, my older sister, Betsy, and she was very enthusiastic. She said, run with it. My family gave me a computer for Christmas because I didn't have one before that. I was using a Commodore 65 and one of those sprocket printers. You're old enough to remember those?
I mean, I totally am. That was like cutting edge tech back in the day.
Well, I would write from time to time. I would listen to music. As I was inspired, I would write notes in the journal longhand, and things came together. Stories came together. Originally, I thought that the book would be titled Bedouin Homes and Gardens, or How I Survived the Arabian Nights. But which I think is a great title, but it wasn't a great title for this book because were too many heavy-duty life things that happened in the course of this memoir. So, but the writing of the memoir was something else. So put away, take it out, put it away, take it out. Do it on Commodore 64, get a real computer. Learn to use WordPerfect. Mind you, when I came back, we're talking about middle to late 80s. When I came back from Saudi, my sister had to show me how to use an electric typewriter. That's how technical I was.
You had to step up from your old Wedgwood.
Yes. I couldn't use my feather pen anymore. But, different word programs, different computers, different moves, life. So, yeah, I showed it to people. I was afraid my my family and friends and children's eyes would get stuck up in the top of their heads from hearing me reference my book so often.
Uh-huh.
And
So there was some excitement there, though.
there's somewhat,
There was some excitement in it for you at that time.
it was exciting just to be putting it down on paper. And since I shared it with Betsy, she shared it with Rachel Cohn, my niece, a well-published author and very talented. And we all respect her authorship. So Rachel gave me a lot of encouragement and set me up with a New York editor with an interview with her. And she gave me some developmental editing. I didn't know that's what it was back then, but now I do. I've come a long way. And yeah, then grandchildren came along, another move came along, weddings came along. And I said, to hell with it. I just wasn't interested. I said, no, it's probably no good and it's never going to go anywhere. And then I think 2 Christmases ago, 3 people separately asked me, could they read it? Because they had heard I'd been writing something. And one of them was my husband Najib's, Uncle Najib's nephew. He's a PhD in sociology and has done a lot of work writing about the effect of war on 3 Middle Eastern societies. And he asked me, could he read it? Well, he loved it. He said he learned more about his family from reading that than his father ever told him.
Right.
Father's the baby. He didn't know some of these things. I had to drag it out of your uncle.
Yeah.
And of course, the publishing industry has changed since then.
Quite a lot.
Quite a lot. So it's possible for someone who, like myself, in spite of the fact that I know very little about the ins and outs of formatting and all the gobbledygook that you have to do. So,
Yeah, and how much easier was it to do with a project that you were into and excited to some degree about finishing? How much easier was it to learn those things through that lens rather than something that you didn't have your heart in, but you were trudging through?
I wanted this book to be published, even if it didn't have a huge readership, because I wanted my sons to understand what their father had done and really what I had been through also. And my grandchildren, I said, okay, even if it doesn't, make any fireworks or anything like that,
Uh-huh.
it's a huge accomplishment.
Granted.
It's something I'm proud of, but I have to say here, it would not have been published except for my youngest sister, Barbara, who very generously said she would do a big edit. And we spent hours. I went up for a weekend, spent 12 hours at her living room table, reading it out loud. And she'd say, you need a transition here. No, that doesn't go with your theme. Get rid of it. And she'd say, this is really good, but it doesn't go here. Look ahead 10 pages. It goes there, paragraph 4. I mean, the woman has.
She is very good at it. I can attest to that. So real quick, or, as quickly as you think it's necessary, I know that people listening to this, the question is, who's this Najib guy and what is the importance of him in this story that makes it compelling to want to write about it?
Najib is my husband. When I met him, he was James. I met him in Baltimore, Maryland. He was boarding with the lady who owned the house next door to me. We were both in college. He is brilliant. He didn't speak English when he came to the States, so he would write all his papers in French and then translate them to English. When I went to his graduation from college, several of his professors told me, the world's going to hear from this man.
Uh-huh.
So he did, when we were first married, he worked for the World Bank. He was a diplomat with the World Bank. So he had a UN passport and could come and go as he pleased. He was also, because he worked for the World Bank, he did not pursue getting his American citizenship because he was hired as a Lebanese.
That comes in the story later.
I think it does, yes. So he was headhunted. This group in Lebanon and between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia were looking for someone with restaurant experience. Najib had managed a couple of classy restaurants for hotels while he was in college. Somebody finance, and that was the department he was in with the World Bank, and someone who spoke Arabic. So that's where the decisions come in. They say, my kids like football. And when they were younger, they'd jump up and down screaming decisions when the opposing quarterback threw an interception. And so I say it in the book, we make decisions throughout our days, throughout our lives without even thinking about it. But deciding to get up in the morning, deciding what to eat for breakfast. Mm-hmm. And some decisions are life-changing. Like, you want to go to Saudi Arabia? Sure, why not? That was life-changing.
Yeah. And I take it you decided to go to Saudi Arabia. Well, I know you did. So it's a leading question.
That's what the book is about. The book is about our decision to move to Saudi Arabia. Najib was politically involved at the time. And he had one foot in Saudi and one foot in Lebanon because for multiple reasons, for political reasons, but also the people who hired him, the owners of the hotel, the Lebanese owners, had him going back and forth.
Was it?
So he did, when there was a change in government in Lebanon, and his, one of the owners of the group of businesses that he was working for, the Lebanese owners, was offered a position within the government. And I do believe this is because he had donated quite a lot of money. Right. He took Najib with him to, prop him up, and but asked him to keep one foot in the Saudi business, which he did. Yeah. But that's like way in there.
So that was the inroad into the meat of the book, which is kind of his stepping into a more political role. Is that what I'm to take away from that? Or
the book is more about me coming to realize things and how it affected me, because it's my memoir. But in writing this book, my husband sat down and I interviewed him. I learned a lot about, like I was remembering stories he had told me that I would never really believed. And so I said, these stories true? Absolutely, about his family. So there's a lot about his very colorful family and their history. His grandfather, who was a quartermaster for a region of a part of the Ottoman Empire that was in that region of Lebanon, and how he worked for the Turks and what came of that. And it's just, for an American who really hadn't done much traveling, this is wide-eyed, and oh my goodness, it was just, could this be true? And then to go to Saudi Arabia, like living on the moon.
Yeah, a little white girl in Saudi.
Well, yeah, but there were a lot of us. We're all the same. If you're a woman, you don't drive. There's nothing to do.
That's what I mean. Was there a big culture shock from being in the States and then inserting your Western overlay into that culture? It was hard, but a lot of us. I was lucky enough to land in a compound, within a circle. It wasn't too huge. I think maybe 14 to 17 houses, maybe 12 or 13 different nationalities within that compound. But the unifying language was English, and the women just bonded. We would get together all the time. Quite a few of us either had just had a baby or were pregnant.
or had young children around that age, we all had the same concerns. We were all guests of the Saudi government and had to abide by their rules.
Yeah.
My big problem, I
Yeah.
had a 3-year-old at the time, and I was very pregnant when I moved there. So we thought we would bring Najib's mother from Lebanon to stay with us when the baby was born. But that's not so easily done. We could not get a visa for her to come. So what to do with a 3-year-old? Well, Paul ended up spending the night at his friend's house, and they took very good care of him. But it was not what we had planned for when Nick was born.
Yeah. The circumstances, you go with them. I find it really cool and interesting that you were able to, in this circumstance, find a lot of commonality with others and build a group dynamic. Did you make long-term friends there, or was that?
It's really funny. I made friends there that I carry around with me in my heart. I might never see some of them again, but in the writing of this book and in the social media that I share about the book online, I've been amazed at how many of my female friends from Saudi Arabia have made comments and said that they're waiting to read it. And yeah, if not the actual person, there's one friend whose daughter friended me on Facebook. His daughter lives in, I think, Abu Dhabi. So yeah, there is, and then a few, not a whole lot, but a few.
So you said something just now about carrying around in your heart, and you've been talking around and through a couple things. And one is like the importance of your sons hearing this story, the progeny of those that were around you at that time hearing this story, Najib's compatriot that his son wanted to hear his father's story triangulated through Najib's story and your interaction with that, and our children's story. And so there's this sense of like epigenetics, for instance, which I would put through the lens of the sins of our fathers kind of relationship. How much of this for you is stepping in to heal generational relationships for like your grandchildren's children? And what's your relationship with that space, wherever you want to?
Maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Maybe my children do need healing, but I think we all have very good relationships there. That there has to be some issues with the fact that their father's in Lebanon, but I wanted them to know that he tried. That I wanted them to know what he did. Now he's a huge personality, and when he was working for the World Bank, he was part of a think tank called within DC called the American Lebanese League, and these were a group of young men and women who were concerned about what was going on in their country. I mean, there was what they called civil war. The PLO was taking over Beirut. I mean, the Lebanese president couldn't go into West Beirut without the permission of Yasser Arafat. So there was a lot of upheaval, and it does seem like that's just the main theme for this country, which is sad. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. So Bashir Ismail was their hero. Bashir Ismail was Pierre Ismail, who was a leader of one of the militias in Lebanon, a Christian militia. And I'm not going to get into all the politics and the war and the massacre and everything, but this was their hope, to bring a unified Lebanon, to have leadership, because there was talk about splitting it in two and having two different countries. And these guys were devoted patriots. So they were trying to work up some help through the American government, through lobbying, through getting in touch with celebrities who had maybe Lebanese ancestry, like Danny Thomas and his family, people like that. So that was the big deal. And then while we were in Lebanon and things were changing, and Bashir Ismail was going to be the next president, and there was hope and there was joy, and he was assassinated.
Yeah.
And Najib and his friends took it very hard, very hard. He wasn't only their friend that they knew personally, but he was their hope, and that's the way he would talk about him. He was their hope.
Mm-hmm.
He was hope for the end of war, for leadership, for a unified Lebanon, everybody coming together. And he was murdered. His brother did take the presidency, and it was under his brother's presidency that Najib was involved with that government. Mm-hmm. But Najib was also talking to people in the American government, the U.S. government. And I didn't know until I interviewed for him for this book. He would say, well, I can tell you this now because this one's dead, or I can tell you this now because that one's dead. I didn't know until I interviewed him that while I was sitting at home with a newborn and two little ones in Beirut, because we moved to Beirut when he was asked to become part of the government, he was being helicoptered onto the border of Israel, between Israel and Lebanon, where he was part of a big team that were negotiating with the Israelis for a treaty. Yep. And it went on for a while, and it was called the May 17th Treaty. And it did go through, but then it went kaput because the world stepped in, politics happened, and nothing stays the same. But
yeah, it does change.
Yeah, he tried, and he was part of it, and it was dangerous.
Yeah.
He said, that's why I didn't tell you. He said, well, it put you in danger. Said, okay.
And do you feel like there's a sense in this that we've been, Mara and I, my wife, for those that don't know, have been talking, and a couple other people, about this concept of bearing witness. Is there a sense in writing this book that is about bearing witness to the honor of the experience that you had and the trajectory of that story?
That's a very good way to put it. I hadn't thought of that before. Mm-hmm. I think about bearing witness, especially if I go to a wedding. Yeah. You're bearing witness.
Yeah.
And yes, this was I think you take these 7.5 to 8 years for both of us, for Najib and for me, and it's like you could cut it out, circle out of our lives, but that was the colorful part. That was what formed us, or at least me. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it for him also. It was eye-opening. It was tragic. We sat for 3 days in a hallway in our third floor apartment in Beirut, in Juni, which is this eastern suburb of Beirut. Uh-huh. And with no electricity while bombs fell around us. And when we finally could check, there was a nice circle of craters all around our building. So yeah, that kind of thing.
Do you have a feeling that there's like some kind of providence involved in it being a circle around your building and having stepped through that, or just happenstance for you?
I'm kind of gal who leads towards providence.
Yeah.
And
sounds like it. I have a mental image in my head, and I'm like,
and I'm
like, yeah.
After we moved back to the States, shortly after I moved back to the States with the boys, and mind you, no cell phones yet, no Skype, no Zoom. So, landlines. And they didn't always work very well. But he called me, he said he was coming for Easter. I got up in the morning and put on the news, probably my first mistake. And the lead news is Beirut on fire, this huge conflagration and the bombs and this and that. Oh my God. So Najib literally would surface every 3 days try to get in touch with me and say he was alive. And then the last time he told me he had found someone who was going over the mountain to Zahe, where his town, and he was going to go with them. And I stayed up all night visualizing angels around his car. Oh yeah, I do believe in providence. I do.
Yeah. So what was that like for you living through that, his, temporary exodus out of Beirut in that time frame? That
It was
sounds
terrifying.
cool.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
What does it mean about you that you were able to live through those experiences and follow through over a long period of time to complete this book?
Well, I think it was therapeutic to tell you the truth. It had to come out. It was like I was regurgitating it. And when I first had the nerve to show it to Najib, I walked away from him. Hadn't written a whole lot, but I had written a story about meeting his mother. And when I walked back into the room, his shoulders were going up and down. I was behind him, and he was laughing. He said, "How do you remember this stuff? How do you forget?"
Yeah.
So it's been a healing thing, I think, in a lot of ways for me and probably for him also. And there's a lot of interest in this book in Lebanon. So I don't think English is anybody's first language, but I think they're going to muddle through. They're very interested.
Maybe a translation in your future. Najib would be perfect to translate it.
Yeah, the English version does.
Right. What do you think the interest for them is in reading it?
Well, this is mostly family who's interested in friends. They're it's gotten a lot of it's been talked up for a while, and Najib's been talking it up, and they know him, and so they want to know our story. They want to read it, and they all know their characters in the book. So,
All right. So paint me a picture of why is it that you feel like publishing it is in a way an acknowledgement that you want people to read it. What do you think people will resonate with and get out of this experience that you're sharing through this book?
I think it's a compelling story, to tell you the truth, of young naivete, of going through life with rose-colored glasses and just rolling with the punches. Because I was just looking. I just said I would have gone anywhere with him, and I did go anywhere with him, and it was very different. And I went in with the attitude that I was going to learn something. I was going to take something away. I was going to grow. And I told my mother, I'm going to have my children. I'm going to practice the piano and learn Arabic. And I did. I did.
Excellent.
I mean, I think women can always find commonality. While I was writing the one section about Saudi Arabia, for some reason in the background, I had Pete Seegert's "Oh, Had I a Golden Thread and a Needle So Fine" playing in the background. And I had never really paid attention to all the lyrics before, but the second verse says, "I would sing of the courage of women giving birth." And Abram, that had never struck me before, that it takes courage, because it's just something that women do. But here we all were, multiple nationalities, but we all were guests in the kingdom. We were all away from our homes. None of us had our mothers anywhere around, and we were all young.
Misery. Young. What age were you at that time?
I celebrated my 30th birthday over there with 29 people I didn't know and couldn't talk to. And they were probably plants.
Nice.
A lot of them became very good friends. A lot of them were never seen again because their husbands were fired.
Oh, yeah. That's the regime change kind of thing.
Well, it's one of the reasons he was brought into this group, because they said there was a lot of theft.
Oh,
I
gotcha.
mean, I mean, this is Saudi Arabia. If the king was coming to the Eastern Province, any hotel, restaurant that he went to, or the queen or the prince, whoever, they had just gold plate, sterling silver, baccarat crystal. I mean, by the boatload, and it was just disappearing. So
Uh,
yeah, that was one of his assignments, was to clean up the mess.
how did you feel about like, did you have times where you were engaged in that kind of opulence? And if so, how did you feel about that display that I don't feel like you really get outside of that system of royalty.
Well, it did not display for me, but it was there, and I knew it was there. Now, there was an occasion a couple of years in where the Queen Mother of Saudi Arabia came with some of the princesses to visit the Eastern Province, to visit relatives, and they stayed at the Carlton Al Moaibid Hotel because the cuisine was renowned, Lebanese cuisine. They stayed. So Najib had to clear the hotel of anybody else. And the boys and I were told we couldn't go over to our usual haunts while the celebrities were there. But we watched, had a penthouse, which you'd laugh at, it was 7 stories high, but it was the tallest building around. So we could sit on my kitchen counter, my boys could, and we could watch this procession going through. Of limousines and all these black spot women getting out, and soldiers with scimitars and everything, very formal and very regimented. It was exciting. And then there was a commotion when the Queen Mother had her collection of VCR tapes, and she wanted a bigger television to watch them on, and they turned the hotel upside down and couldn't find them. So Najib came over with some workers from the hotel to our place, and he asked Paulette, said, "Do you mind lending your television to the Queen for a week?" And he said, "I'll give you something else. Don't worry." So they grudgingly let the Queen Mother over their television while she stayed there. But the excitement while they were there was that these princesses were young teenagers. And Najib got a call in the middle of the night one night from the front desk saying, "You got to get over here right away because these young women are asking for you. They want us to open the bowling." So he ran over, and they're all in black, but they convinced him, and he did call in he calls him the general, but he was the Queen Mother's main bodyguard, and he was, probably a general within the army, but that was his assignment. And at much risk to their own selves, they went and opened the bowling alley. And Najib always said thank goodness he knew where all the switches were and he knew how to do it. And he said they went in the ladies' room, came out looking like teenagers and cut off shorts and T-shirts, and they bowled and they giggled, and their cousin came in a limousine. This is like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Their cousin that they had come to visit, and they all spoke English, and but it was dangerous for him. So at the end of the night, when the sun's starting to come up, they all left. Yeah, they went their merry ways. The chief said he had so much adrenaline going, he couldn't even go back home to bed, and he was scared.
Yeah.
So nothing was said. And then when the Queen Mother was leaving, and it's funny, his description of there would be an alert or a bell or something would be wrong when she was out in the hall, or any of the women were, they drink, because they only had male workers in Saudi Arabia. They were medical in the hospital. It's all men, and they don't have to scamper and hide so they wouldn't see these ladies' faces. So everybody's kind of keeping a distance. So all the limousines coming in a circle in front of the hotel, picking up the different, and then the Queen Mother comes out, and Najib was allowed to go out from a distance. He bowed to her and she beckoned him, and she reached over without the general realizing what she was doing and grabbed his scimitar and presented it to Najib as a gift.
Yeah.
So he has that hanging over a doorway in our place in Lebanon. And I asked one of my sons, I said, "You've seen that before, right?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you know what it is?" "No." So he didn't know the story. He had never asked. So you asked me why I'm writing. This was just such a rich experience and so intense.
Mhm.
Even though Saudi was like being on the moon and it was slow, not just for me, but for Najib also. He was from a democratic country. He was from the mountains. He didn't,
Yeah.
I dealt better with the heat and humidity than he did. I'm from Baltimore.
Yeah.
We made heat and humidity. But
Very
yeah,
fun.
I wanted to share it. And I do think it's a bigger story because the title, When the Fudge Trees Bloom.
Mhm.
Okay, so English was his third language. My mother has a million fudge trees on her property. This is very cute. He meant figs. Okay, that's nice. But how do you make fudge? You mix the bitter, you mix the sweet, and you mix the fat. It's a
Yep.
metaphor for life. So that's the theme of the book. Life isn't always what you think it's going to be. Your decisions dictate how your next step is going to be taken, and you can't go backwards.
Can't go backwards, but we can use the historicity of experience of our elders to learn how to find more operable ways to negotiate life out of that. And I think there's a great value in
What?
these stories of tumult and successes that
You make
arise
fudge
from the friction and the heat that's generated from trying times and conflict of sorts. And so that's cool.
There's a Joni Mitchell song, Circle Game.
Yes.
And there's one line in there where she says, something's lost and something's gained from living every day.
Mhm.
And that hit me hard.
Mhm.
That isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
How
It's
you deal with the adversity
mhm.
is going to determine how you go forward.
Something else occurred to me while you were relating the your time in Saudi Arabia, and there's I think many of us grow up in circumstances where life presents itself and the momentum of the day to day is such that these small stories that at the time really influence us and they're the process of how these things progress in our lives and they're so often not told you know with our like my father very rarely told certain types of stories with me. My grandfather, your father, your mother, I never got directly from them those stories. And so, how is it knowing now what you knew then? How is it that you approach your grandchildren now? How has that changed through the lens of this book in helping you to relate your experience to them when you are engaged with them?
My my grandchildren are young.
Mm-hmm.
Girls, the girls are not quite as sophisticated as they think they are. They're really smart.
Yeah.
Good writers too, really good writers. And they've heard my stories, some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Petra, Paul's daughter, said she wanted to read my book. And I said, "Really? Why do you think so?" And she said, "Well, I think it'd be interesting." I said, when you were over my house when I was working on it before it was published, you asked if you could read something and you said it was boring. Oh, well, that was before. I said, "Petra, it was 3 months before." So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe if it's in
Time,
book form.
time
I think
moves differently for young ones.
well, it's true. It's true. And she's a writer herself. So in that respect, I think that she might enjoy it. But I look for them to read it when they're older.
I more meant in your day to day and how you relate to them. Do you feel like this process has opened you up to how in different ways to how you engage with them?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Abram.
I'm getting at something that's slightly ineffable. Um, I've found that when I undertake really deep seeking processes in art, that can awaken in me a curiosity about how I relate to others in ways that changes the expression of how I interact with people.
Well,
And
family
deepens
is
those
paramount.
relationships. Yeah, kind of always has been for you and our family in general.
It
So
has been. It has been. And it's such a blessing to be a mother. I am very, very privileged to have
mhm.
7 grandchildren and be close with all of them. They don't live far away. And 6 of them consider themselves, they call themselves the chaotic crew. And my house is the meeting house, and they treat me like I'm one of them. So I do try to respect that. And I get phone calls and text messages labeled the cool people. And I said, oh my goodness. And then
You made the list.
I made the list. And sometimes I'll type in, I'll say, you do realize there's an elder in this conversation. And Alex answered, don't worry, Grandma, because my mother monitors everything anyway. Keep it cool. Keep it cool. No, they mean everything. While I was in Saudi Arabia, I miss my family terribly. You're going through these experiences, but I didn't have anybody to share it with, to bounce it off of.
Mhm.
So it's like, if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. And I, I have to look for the passage, but there was a passage in Jewel in the Crown, which I think is a trilogy or it might be 4 books. It's set in India where the protagonist is writing about being invisible because he's outside his culture, outside his language. It's like he doesn't exist. And I really related to that. And
Yeah.
so now Lebanon is different because I have so much family there. And especially now that we're all, older and our children are grown, our children are friends.
And your
And
children are married, and their wives, well, specifically Rosie, uh, the extension of those families and the new
right,
people. What
right.
that is. When
That's
you,
the end of the book is with Paul's and Rosie's wedding when Paul met Rosie in his father's hometown of Zaha, and it was quite a wedding.
yeah,
And I really felt like she was me in reverse. She was coming to a strange world, not speaking the language, although she's, oh my goodness, she's so fluent now. And really not knowing what she was getting into. So she gave me a good, she closed the circle for me.
yeah, yeah. It reminds me that the tree falling in the forest might not make a sound. You won't necessarily know that, but it falls, and so that motion in our lives of those experiences, even when there's not somebody else other than our own perception to bear witness, have impact. And what we choose to do with that motion and that emotion and how to synthesize that into forward progress in our lives. Writing a book is a wonderful endeavor and one that I find daunting. I don't know. Maybe I have it in me. I haven't really delved
I
that.
certainly didn't think I had it in me, but it just fell out. What can I say? Who knew?
Yeah, fell out over what
20 some
25
years.
Yeah. So there's in that there's this sense of like if you never start, you're certainly not going to finish it. And so
Every journey starts with the first step. Yep, it's cliche, but it's true.
oh, it's absolutely true. There's a reason these cliches stick,
Right.
you know. So having done this, because you really are in the state where you're now putting it out there, promoting it, and allowing people to take it as they do and as they will. What are you looking to now that this has found a certain amount of completion? Are you contemplating further books or? Uh,
I found out that I like to write.
mhm.
I do. Whether it's I ever publish anything again or not, I don't know. But I like to write. But consequently, I have 3 granddaughters who I knew wrote. And when last Thanksgiving, I just, fatuous statement. I said, Petra, why don't we make a little writers group? She got all excited. Mrs. Paul's daughter.
Yeah.
They've all 3 girls are cousins, and they've just turned 13. They call themselves sister cousins. So they got all excited. She told Alex. Ruthie came late, so Ruthie didn't hear about it till next day when 6 of them were spending the night with me. And when I talked to Petra about it, I said, "You girls, right?" She said, "No, I'm not doing it unless the boys are doing it too." Right? Like that.
Wow.
So they told Ruthie, she got all excited. I said, you need inner conflict, you need outer friction, you need to try to base your characters on your personalities. And then there's this big discussion on how to label themselves. And they came up with, Ruthie said she was the wet blanket. And Alex, I can't remember what she said she was, but it was same as the wet blanket. Mike was the executor. Petra was the instigator. I can't remember what Ruthie was. Oh no, Ruthie was the wet blanket. We have all the girls. Petra was she was the instigator. Then Jesse labeled himself as the tattletale. Jesse's 9. And Evan, who was also 9, was the voice of reason. Yeah, this makes total sense to me. So they all ran upstairs to my bedroom, left me by myself. And after about an hour, I yelled up and said, "I need a report." And I said, "Well," Ruthie came down. She said, "Well, me mom, it's not the book you thought it was going to be. It's a fantasy. I'm a Batrine Domini hybrid. Jesse's a raccoon. Michael is a Wendigo." And well, you know what? They've written 8 chapters. The girls can write. The boys contribute, but verbally. I write their parts in. And I'm the glue that kind of transitions things. These girls can write.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Petra made a map of the land, the fantasy land, and named all the different species and made boundaries and mountains and everything. It's just amazing. So
I love the capacitance of those who have not put up the blocks of different views of success and all the other trappings that lead us away from that inner playfulness. And fostering that is a wonderful endeavor.
I am proud and humbled that they include me in their group. So I saw Petra last night, and she said, "I've done a lot of writing." I thought, "Oh, I guess I better get in there and take a look." I said, "I think we need to, at least the girls get together, even if it's on Zoom or FaceTime, and read it out loud and see how it sounds to us and figure out where we're going with it next."
Yeah.
We kind of know, but we got to get there.
Well, in that life, we know the end result from the beginning, and how we write the pages of it is kind of up to the choices that we make. You were talking about that. Decisions.
Yeah.
And every moment's an opportunity to make a better decision. And I find I have not yet read, and I say yet because you're going to send me a copy. I have not read your book yet. I really look forward to reading it. Real quick, I don't feel like we got a decent, but I would like a little bit more encapsulated. What's the book about specifically?
The book is a memoir, and it's the chronicling of my experience as a young wife and mother, yeah, with leading a very simple and what I thought was a straightforward life and where it was going to go, and how that decision to move to the Middle East changed me and the perspective of the of how I dealt with the opulence of Saudi Arabia and the restrictions in a closed society, which it was back then, and then to go into the luxury of having family and personal freedoms in Lebanon, but then being under the bombs and being in danger. And again, in Saudi Arabia, with the practicing Christianity in secret because it was against the law. It was just, and that's what the book's about. And then how I tried to make fudge and from some things that were bitter, some things that were sweet in this whole experience. And now at the height of my age, with some wisdom looking back down, I can look at it and see it for what it was. And it was life changing, and it was life forming.
Yeah, and affects those generations that come out of it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Where, if yet, can people find your book, purchase it?
They can find it on Amazon and order it through Amazon. It should be available in bookstores, at least if you ask for it. The title is When the Fudge Trees Bloom, Memories of an American in the Middle East. And if anyone wanted to get in touch with me, they can email me at Cathy Rouhana.
Excellent.
.com. Yes.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Thank you, Abram.
Well, that's a pleasure. Anything else you wanted to add to all of that?
I don't think so. It's been total pleasure talking to you so much.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, there's off-topic things I'm sure we could dig into. I would love it if those who attend this and watch check out that book. I know the story more intimately than I suggest by the questions and all of that. Obviously, being family and knowing the players and all of that, I wanted to step out of that role as nephew and into the interviewer's chair. And I do know from my knowledge of it that it's a wild story that is unexpected and has a lot in it for both our personal journeys in reflection of somebody else's experience and a glimpse into how it is that these things that seem so far away in international affairs come home to roost in ways that are unexpected and touch us at a deep level to bring home the emotional quality of these unsettling and tumultuous events that are perpetuated at times and come up out of the reality that we negotiate these territorial and interpersonal and transactional relationships with each other. And over time, hopefully we come to accord and figure out better and new ways of stepping through the portal of our disagreement. Right? So, yeah.
In Arabic, they say, God willing.
Yeah.
We live in hope.
Yeah. And with that, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Abram.
And
thank you so much.
And have fun in Poland.
Oh, yes. The new
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.